Hello guys, today I'm actually going to be talking about some optimization tricks inside of Houdini, and we're specifically going to be going over a very specific tool, which is subnets. What subnets allow you to do are take a group of nodes like this is the same setup as I'm using here, and bring them all down into a nice little subnet. If you use Blender, you're used to things like group nodes, where you group all of your things in, and then you can dive in and then create little parameters on top, like you see here. These are some settings that I just started with. I'm going to be turning this on to manual because it's a little slow. This scene that I am working on for a building destruction, the effect that this subnet is achieving is essentially just the base fracture. So we can do an exploded view over here. So this tool is basically going to be creating this fracture for us on every object. And I'll be talking about the use cases of subnets and why I think they're so good and, you know, helpful for what we do. So in order to create a subnet, it's really easy. All you would have to do is, I'm gonna go in manual again, but we're going to first select all the nodes that make up this effect. It's not gonna be these object merges, and I'll explain why, and not this time shift, because that's a whole separate thing that I actually don't need right now. But we're gonna select all of these nodes, and we're gonna click this little button over here, which is create subnet from selected. It's also a hotkey Shift C, so you can kind of know that if you want, but it'll create a little subnet for you. I'm gonna undo that because I'm gonna just copy this one over to here. It's kind of the main reason these types of things are created for me. But one of the biggest reasons you want to start using subnets is because you can have stuff like this. This is JRB street meshing. This is a subnet that I created a while ago, specifically to mesh curves into a street. And it was just like a little tool that I made that it only has like two little buttons, but if you dive inside, I think, what the fuck? Allow editing of contents, manual. There we go, sorry. You can see that we have this entire setup in here. And it sort of just runs through this thing. And in my head, what's actually really helpful about subnets is that it makes it really easy because you can save it as like a little node, right? It'll be saved in, we can save it directly, or it could just be a local thing that's only for this to help organize and like hide maybe a really messy node tree. But if you're using the setup a lot, it's really good, and you can create sort of HDAs from it, which is what we're going to actually be doing with this fracture setup, because this is actually a very common fracture setup that I actually use very frequently. So we're going to be doing kind of a lot of that. To kind of go over some things, some like little do's and don'ts before we really get into making the subnet. For one, whatever your main object is, for instance, this little, you know, building top thing that I have, or this building here, any object, anything that's animated, anything that you actually genuinely need to like have access to the data beforehand, like you're using a group node or you're using a paint mask, right? So group paint a mask. If you're drawing curves, right? Anything that sort of requires you to like manually like insert things, and it's not a proceduralized tool in essence. Like a group node can be procedural. Masks can work if you have a mask that you're using every single time and it works because you're using the same topology. Yes, cool. But if it's ever something that you genuinely need to edit, right? Like if I go to this curve tool, you know, the tool allows me to kind of create curves and then, you know, have these have this like drawn curve thing. We don't want that inside the subnet. You want to keep that outside. And the reason why I'm saying this is just because it's really hard, and I'm at least personally not aware of how to actually get the software to recognize these tools when looking above the subnet. This would be something that you could put in the subnet, but you would have to go inside to edit. I'm running with the assumption that you guys want to have a subnet that just has a bunch of settings on it, and you don't want to actually have to go inside to really mess with. So I'm running with that solution. Obviously, this tutorial, as another side note, is a little bit for less for beginners and more for people who are pretty used to Houdini. So just be aware of that. If you're a beginner, it should still be fine. I'm going to be telling you what buttons to hit and stuff, but you know, in terms of some understandings, I might gloss over stuff for the sake of simplicity and time. But yeah, we know how to create a subnet now, and we have all this stuff. If I actually created a subnetwork, which you can do, you can just literally tab and create a subnetwork, you'll see this. This is one of the first things that you're going to want to change. What these actually change here when you start typing are the actual input names. You can see subnetwork number 1 at the bottom over here. And if we change this to, let's say, geo, con for constraints, we'll say like proxy, and then I'll say sim. Like, I don't know, we're just gonna say stuff. You have geo, con, proxy, and sim. So it actually changes the naming. I'll actually be figuring out the output today because I'm gonna be packaging this fracture tool for you guys in this video. It's gonna be mainly for me, but obviously since I have the file, fuck it, take it, save it as an HDA, call it a day. But that's what you're gonna do. Now, to actually get the settings here, because you might be confused, there's not like a thing here that just like Blender is really easy in this sense, where you can literally just drag like the input of something to like, I don't know, like the you can drag like the input of something and it'll like have the settings out in that geometry node. And I think that's really cool, especially when you're like doing like output stuff. It makes it a little bit easier. Houdini is a little bit more annoying, and the way that you sort of go about it is this right here is the actual node that I'm looking at. But what we'll do is we'll go to the setting bar, hit edit parameter interface. Actually, sorry, we're gonna do that on the actual subnetwork. Edit parameter interface. And these are parameters that I have created. You can open them up. You can see force total count is right here. Density attribute right here, global seed right here, relax point right here. This is a relax iteration, sorry. This right here is the actual checkbox over here that turns that on and off. You can actually see that being used here, and you have some output attributes. This is just the scatter settings, so I've only worked with this node. So in order to actually create a thing, a lot of times when people are talking about editing parameters and stuff, what they'll do is they'll do something like dragging something from this column, which is the by type. This sort of gives you every single button and button type imaginable that's on every single node in Houdini. It's sort of like a drag and drop feature, like, oh, you need an integer value here, oh, you need a folder here, oh, you need a float value here, oh, you need like an image thing, boom, drag that in. It's really cool. I think this is helpful. I've used this quite a bunch, and what you would normally do is you would right click on it once you made it, and then right click on something like this, hit copy parameter, and then, oh, okay, I guess I got a fatal error. That's crazy. I did absolutely fucking nothing. Okay. Lovely. Okay, I'll be right back because I do gotta restart my PC because my viewport's lagging, but I do have to restart this anyway, so I get to show you the whole process. Yay! Okay, Houdini Crashed. We deal with it, alright? I'm gonna create a separate Houdini file just to clean it up. I'm gonna make the fracture setup that I normally did, because it's honestly not that bad to set up, and I'm gonna set up like a much lighter version of it. Ignore the fact that my icons are kind of everywhere. When I restart my PC, it just does that, and I have to reorganize everything every single time. It's annoying. Anyways, but we're gonna just kind of go in, start creating the fracture, and I'm gonna show you the step-by-step process of creating a legitimate like subnetwork that you can save as an HDA, and I'm gonna save it on that file just to make my life a little bit easier. Setup, and we're gonna do this. I think this is gonna be a little bit better for you guys anyways if I do it this way, especially for beginners. So first, obviously what we're gonna do is create a geometry node, just make my life a little bit easier. We're gonna call it fracture setup as well. Stay organized. We'll dive in, and we're gonna create a cube because this object doesn't matter. It can get replaced very easily and it's not even going to be in our subnetwork, so it doesn't matter. First things first, we're going to scatter. Again, this tutorial isn't really about the fracture setup itself. I followed a tutorial or a bunch of tutorials to get to the fracture setup that I'm at now. It's kind of an amalgamation of just things that I've learned, so take it or leave it. It's kind of up to you, but we're going to kind of go with that. So for one, we have our scatter. There's sort of a side thing that you could kind of do if you want like the scatter to actually be inside the cube rather than just the surface. You can use an ISO offset. This will come in handy potentially to show off a certain feature called a switch, which I believe we can do switch if. Yeah, we can just do switch if. So we'll do a switch if, and what that'll do is we'll have like just the cube going in and just this going into here. What this will sort of allow us to do is switch between actually using an ISO or no ISO, right? And we can turn this into a parameter that will be able to switch on and off inside of the edit, but we'll use without it for now. And to make my life again a little bit easier, we're going to create little connections. To create a connection, you just hover over a line, hold Alt and click. That'll create this. If you're wondering how I got these weird curves rather than this, it is Shift S. You can see at the bottom what it's doing. Try to make my things look pretty, but that's fine. Anyways, we'll go here. We'll set the force total count to like 100. We don't want to go too crazy. We're then going to use a Voronoi fracture. This is sort of like you could just do this if you really wanted to, but it looks bad. Right? This looks really bad. It's cool. You can see that it is creating interior detail, but not a lot. Now, if we had switched this on, you can see that there's actual like fractured pieces inside. This is a reason why you might want that ISO offset for certain things. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to blast. Reason why is because we want just the inside. I'm going to delete non-selected. We want just this. And the reason we want this is because we're going to actually create really good interior detail and edge detail after the fact, and it's kind of really easy to do that, but I'll explain it. But we need to clean this up a little bit because you can see it's flickering a lot. It's gonna cause problems, so we're gonna use a clean node to fix overlaps but not delete overlap pairs, and we're going to actually fuse before we do that. We're going to do a little fuse and then a clean. So now no flickering, no messed up geometry. Great. Next, we're going to drop a primitive properties. This is sort of my fix for the bounds thing. It might not be the best, but we're doing it anyways. We're just going to do transformations, and we're going to kind of scale everything up by 2. What primitive property does is it kind of just scales all of the points. It'll actually make the fracture a little bit more interesting, but this is sort of like my padding value, and it doesn't just scale the object randomly. You can name all these too if you want to be like really pedantic about it, but we're just gonna kind of let this be its thing. Next, what we're gonna do to get that interior detail is we're going to drop a remesh. The remesh, you can kind of see a little bit better if we turn off that primitive thing, but you can see that it's creating some detail. We'll drop it a little bit. The lower the value, the higher the detail for this target size. So you can kind of already see values that we're going to be using for this setup. And this is perfect, right? This is a small enough detail that you can up kind of later on if you need to. Next, what we're going to do is add a mountain. This is going to create our edge detail and sort of actually displace that interior detail so it looks like actual dirt. I'm going to keep this primitive thing off for now, just to make my life a little bit easier. But you can see we're just going to kind of break this up a little bit. We'll just get some good base value, and we'll turn this back on. And now our thing looks like this. Now we're kind of done with the actual like kind of fracturing of stuff. What we need to do now is just drop a Boolean fracture, and a Boolean fracture will take a cutting object rather than points. So this object that we created right here is a cutting object. It has a bunch of slices of grids and things that will actually cut into the geometry, doing sort of a Boolean function, and give us a much more detailed fracture result. And you can kind of see why I like this one. It gives you a lot of small pieces, big pieces, various chunks. You know, if you really played with like the scatter amount of the initial Voronoi, the mountain value, so it's less displaced maybe, it could be really cool. Exploded view is really good for just looking at stuff, honestly. But this is the entire network, literally. Like this is it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna kind of clean this up a little bit so that my eyes feel good about what I'm doing. Because this is the entire setup to go over, we're going to select all the objects we need, which are just these. We're not going to grab the box. We just need these. And we're going to click this little subnet button. Or you can hit Shift-C, which I'll do right here. Shift-C. And that will sort of load. You can see the bottom. It's loading. And it will drop a subnet for us. We'll name it real quick. Call it Fracture Setup, and I'll just write JRB on the side because I will be naming it that probably. And I know for a fact that for this fracture setup, we don't need all of these inputs. These will disappear once we actually create an HDA. So for now, I don't really care what these are named. The only one I care about is this first input, and we're just going to name it Geo 4 or 2. We'll say Geo 4 Fracture. That looks pretty good. Maybe 2 works better. You know, you can get very pedantic with the actual naming things, but Geo Diffracture is what our input says. Cool. Next, what we're gonna do is we're gonna hit Edit Parameter Interface, and we have all this stuff. First thing I usually do is I don't like seeing these labels. These are gonna disappear anyways, but I like to just make them invisible. We'll go here, hit all of them, and make them visible. Hit Apply. Now we have nothing here. Great. We're gonna hit Apply and Accept. We'll just save real quick so that way if my thing does crash, I have it saved. We're gonna drop into here where we're gonna need to clean up a little bit, and we'll do the Shift S thing, and we're gonna move these inputs away. These will disappear later, and we have our output and our input. Our input is the box 1 that we created. These obviously have nothing plugged in, so it's fine. The way I like to do this is I usually like to drag in folders. Folders are sort of like the way that we're going to separate a lot of this stuff and kind of make it really easy, right? So we're going to say this first one is going to be our scatter settings. You guys saw that at the beginning, but it's going to be our scatter settings, and we're going to hit Apply and Accept. I usually make these the same. Label is sort of the outward facing name that's actually there, and if you hover over it, you can see parameter interior cusp angle there. That's sort of what the name is, but I usually like to just kind of do this. You can change the actual folder type to all of these, which I will mess with to just make the node look pretty. And if we come out here, you can see scatter setting. Cool. All of the scatter stuff is going to be this. All of these 3 are going to be messed with, and I don't even think this one gets messed with. No, I mean we might turn on this setting over here, the treating surface thing, because that might be important later to avoid some issues sometimes that I run into. But these are the settings we're going to be, or the nodes that we're going to be applying to our thing, so that is just good to know. I'm going to delete these because we don't need them. First, we'll start with the ISO offset. I usually like to go down the chain so it's a little bit easier. Actually, we're not even going to mess with the ISO offset because the settings that I have here are pretty good. I don't want to overwhelm you with options, and I think this is just kind of like unneeded. Really just there to have a bunch of points scattered. So what we'll do is we'll actually add our switch node, and we only need to grab this, which is enable, and it will enable. We can hit actually we won't hit apply yet. We'll say use ISO, use volume scatter, but we're gonna hit apply, and if we go out, we can see our first settings. Honestly, to just make this a little bit better, I'm going to output this. We'll do the switch node. So here you can see it turns on when it's at 1 and off when it's at 0. Now, I don't really like these sliders. So something that I tend to do with this type of thing is I like to use a button. You can change the actual type of parameter here just by doing this, which is basically every single thing that's in here. So if you need to see what something looks like, you can literally just drag and drop it to see what it does. But what I want to use is a button. And if we hit apply, oh, sorry, not a button. I lied. We don't want to use a button. Sorry, I don't make these too often, but what we want is a toggle. We want a toggle button. So this will switch between actually using a volume scatter versus apply and accept, I think, right? Yeah, okay. So you can see we're actually not using one and we're using one. Really cool. Now let's output this, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna edit parameter interface again. So now we have a little button that just says use volume scatter. Really cool, very easy. Next, what we'll do, and that sort of takes care of our switch node. Next, what we will do is we're going to grab all of the scatter settings we want. We're going to grab force total count. We're going to actually grab this little button here, and also this. I don't know why it doesn't come as a pair, but it's whatever. When we got that little checkbox, we can say horizontally join to next parameter, so it actually acts the same as this, and we'll just delete the label by doing that. So now if we come here, we have a density attribute, force total count, all that stuff. So that's if we created an attribute. I'm not going to explain how that works, but that does come up sometimes, so that's there. Next, relax iterations comes up quite often, so we're gonna bring that in. We're also gonna bring this in. We're going to horizontally join and turn that off. Hit apply. I'm also gonna just make this bigger so I don't have to keep dragging it away. And I think that's good for this. Oh, sorry, we also have global seed. We'll want that, so let's hit apply. We're then going to do output attributes. What I'm going to do is I'm only going to pick the ones that I want, but I want another folder, specifically in the scatter settings, and it's going to be output attributes. This way it's a little bit more organized, so I know that it's specifically for the scatter settings themselves, but that's how we're going to do it. The one attribute we would want is density. Density comes up quite a bit in terms of actually needing that. Horizontal, we're going to want to output P scale potentially. This comes up quite a bit. Horizontal, turn that off, and we'll probably want an ID attribute potentially to sort of help. And I do want this because this will sort of transfer attributes from the actual object above. So we do kind of want all of these just in case. So I'm going to put them all in. I think this is a separate, hold up, let me hit apply on that because I want to check something. Okay, it does bring that in. I just wanted to make sure. Next, we're going to grab that vertex. We're going to grab the primitive. We're going to grab the detail. We're going to grab the, I think, detail as detail, and just hit apply. So now if we come up, we can see we have all of these with a little subfolder in here that could be kind of anything you want. I'll show you. They have different folder types. I like collapsible because then we can kind of drop it down if we actually need to access it. It's really cool. But you can kind of try any of these, however you want to do. One thing that I like to also use is spacers. You can kind of see that this is a little awkward, that it's a different type of attribute setting than these. Like these ones you're toggling on, and these ones you're kind of transferring. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add a spacer between that, I believe. Yeah, point attributes, and we're going to hit apply. That's a little small one, so we'll just make it large. And now we have a little bit of a space between that. This is good for organization and stuff, which would be really good. I even want one for that use volume scatter thing, so that way it stands out just a little bit. Make it medium. Cool. And that's generally all you need to know, right? This just starts becoming a game of like adding folders. You know, we have this big folder for scatter settings. Next, what we want is we're gonna call it either detail or fracture settings. So I'll call it fracture settings because I think that's more appropriate to what we want. We'll hit apply, and these fracture settings are going to be the ones that we talked about before. Again, these ones are not being changed, so we'll add this. This is our scale value for the primitive. I'm going to rename it, right? So you can rename all these values, and I'm going to rename it to sort of padding value. Now, if you want to create like a little tool tip, like if someone hovers over it, they should be able to read scales primitives along X, Y, and Z axes. You can see that little help tip. So we can actually type down here what it's actually doing. Like, be careful of going too high, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, try to keep values low to avoid bad overlaps. I kind of know this is a problem, so I'm going to tell you that it's a problem. When we hit apply, you can see that we have a new folder as well that we can click, and you can see our padding value, which if we hover over it, it says try to keep values low to avoid bad overlaps. Really, really cool. I'm also going to change the name to scale because that's also what that is, kind of. Also, I don't really like that it's 222. Actually, you know what? No, I'll keep this because it might be nice to have a vector value for that. So we'll keep that. Next, what we're going to do is the remesh. The remesh is probably the only thing in here that I'd actually need to legitimately change in terms of like detail settings. So something that might come up is Target size, would we want to mess with iterations? I feel like this just makes it slower for no reason. You wouldn't actually need to mess with that. Smoothing, maybe, I don't know. What's cool is you can do this for any node. You can edit perimeter interface for any node, and like if you can dive in, there's a bunch of stuff. You can just grab settings. You can be like, oh, well, I actually do want smoothing. Let me bring that in there. So you can do that, even with my nodes that I'm giving you guys. But for this, we just want target size. So we'll do that, and we'll just call this remesh amount. I'll leave the name as target size. In the help, I'll say decrease to values lower than 1 will, I don't know, lower values up res the geo. That's basically what it does, right? And there's a range value. This is actually something that I didn't bring up earlier, but sometimes they're locked. We do want to actually lock this one because we don't want it to go below 0. And 1 to 0 is kind of fine, but what you can kind of do is sort of give people like, okay, like only go up to this value, right? So this has like a max range of 10,000 or 100,000. So if we go here and we look at our scatter settings, you can see that we can drag it all the way up to 100,000. I'm not going to do that because it's going to crash if I do that. Actually, well, I mean, it might not, but you can see I can drag it all the way to 100,000 and that's when it will clip. Cool, right? Now you can make that value anything. We can say like just 10,000, and now we only have a value of 10,000. So that's just a little thing, right, that I would say to just remember exists. So cool, we have our remesh done. Another thing that we're going to want is our displacement level. So we're going to want amplitude, that needs to go in there. We're going to need element size. We don't need animation. We might want the actual fractal settings. So you know what, let's do that. Let's do fractal settings. Fractal type, I mean, max octaves, luchronicity, roughness. I don't think you would want warping in this process, so I'm not going to add that. We'll even add noise type, which would be here. Add zero centered. Yeah, everything here is actually pretty good. I'm going to hit apply because we're going to actually need to do some organizing for this one, I believe. Because if I look at that, that's all over the place. I'm confused. I'm very confused. So first, we'll separate padding value with just a simple spacer. Probably set it to medium, just so we know what that is. We're then going to maybe set a spacer for the actual remesh amount. We'll set that to medium as well. And then all of this stuff is just noise settings, right? So what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a subfolder in here, and we're going to grab anything that has to do with that mountain node, and we're going to drag it into here. We're going to name this node, and we're going to call it sort of displace and noise, and we'll copy that. So displace and noise. We could make 2 separate folders. I actually might do that, you know what, just to kind of show you guys, and I would actually prefer it that way anyways. So we'll do that. Displace noise. We're gonna hit apply. So now we have sort of 2 settings, right? And all of that noise stuff, actually, you know what, sorry, we don't need that. I rather actually have this all in one. That's fine. Okay, so we have amplitude. We can maybe replace this with displace amount or edge detail. There's actually what is it, RBD material fracture. This is a good node for reference, but we have edge detail and noise height. That's actually what I want. Is I'm gonna name it something similar that people are used to with Houdini. So we're gonna call it noise height. We have a noise height. We'll want to probably put this above because we want the noise type for just this, and we'll say element size, and then this stuff was subsettings to that displacement. So what I will do is I will add another folder into the same folder with just all of these into it. We'll hit apply, so that way you can kind of see that this is there and it's a little separate, and we'll just call this kind of noise settings. Hit apply, and this is pretty good, right? We kind of have like a very clean sort of setup. Yeah, okay, so I don't think we need anything from this. We did just kind of want like this is some kind of fracture settings stuff. So we'll actually take this treat geometry and treat cutting surface as in there as well. For the fracture settings, I'll probably put that above. Sorry, I meant to put them like here. Hit apply, and then we'll do another spacer there, and we'll just even add like a small spacer there. So we're just making stuff organized, man. Like this is like you're making this for the public probably, so it's good to, you know, make sure everyone gets the setting that they need. Now that is done, we basically have two really good folders that we can apply and accept and actually pretty much be like good with, right? We would just need to make sure this output is over here. Now, as you can see, we're only outputting the geometry. We're missing the constraints. Now, you might make the constraint somewhere else, but you know, I might want access to that constraint. So what we're going to do is we're actually just going to type in, while we're in the subnet, we're going to create a node called output. They actually do have an output node, and it has an index of 1. You can actually change what output number it is if you have multiple outputs, and you can have a lot, right? But we only need 1, so 0 and 1, and we're just going to output that. So now we have 2 outputs. But if we come out, you can see we have 2 connections. So I'll drop a null. You can see we have the geo, and this one, we have the constraints. So we have both, but they're named output 1 and output 2. I've never actually been able, I don't know how to change this fully. I'll be so honest. I don't think I've ever figured out how to do this. I don't know if maybe I can just say geo, and I will say geo. No. Yeah, I'll be right back just so I can actually figure out how to do that, and then I will just add that to the video, and then we'll talk about how to actually create an HDA from this. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not too sure if I can change the name of this stuff. It might come up when we're actually saving the node, because I know that's also how I get rid of these extra inputs here. So we're gonna kind of move on. We did fully create our little HDA the way that I actually would have wanted. So cool. So to actually save an HDA, all you have to do is right click on the node and do create digital asset. This is going to be our asset label. Tab for submenu is going to be digital assets. That's where I want it to save. This is like my area. Digital assets are essentially things that you create, so usually that's a good area to be. Add author name, add branch, add version, version 1.0, which would be good if you're going to update it and you plan to. And you can see that we're saving it in this file location, which is where, you know, Houdini is saved to. File name, I don't usually change this stuff, so we'll just kind of hit create, and I believe when we hit create, it's going to actually give us all of these settings that we need, and you can see that everything got updated. We want a minimum input of 1, a maximum input of 2. It did kind of recognize that stuff. I believe we can actually change the icon, like the little subnet icon you can see here, sop_subnet. So I might, I don't know, let's go to my desktop and see if there's a cool image that we can use. Actually, you know what would be good? Let's do this. We'll zoom in, let's turn that off, and we'll grab that. I don't know if it needs to be specific or anything, but I'm gonna just do that. We're gonna grab that image we just created. I believe this would work actually, which is kind of funny. If I hit apply, yeah, we get our little image. That's funny. I like that. We don't need to do version parameter. This is like if we needed to actually edit the parameters now. We don't need to. We already set that all up beforehand, so good on us. We don't need to do shit. Node, guide geometry, editable nodes, unit length 1, default state, input, output. Okay, so we actually can label. Good. I'm gonna say fracture geo, and then I'm gonna say constraints, and then we'll hit apply, and you can see we had fracture geo and this, as well as our input being the correct way. There's a little help things. So help, I believe, is just generally like if you hover over a node, maybe it would have something. I don't know, maybe it's something in here like node comment or something, I don't know, but I believe it would help. Like, I don't know where you would go to actually see this message pop up, but it would probably tell you some like facts about the node. There's code, scripts, interactive, extra files, and save. Honestly, you don't need to change any of this stuff. It's really just basic. If you need to actually do any parameter changes, do them here and now. And then the input output stuff, because I couldn't do this earlier for some reason. And then we're gonna hit apply and accept. So now, if we look up fracture setup by JRB or fracture setup JRB, you can see my little image and it pops up and boom, we have a little node now. And it's a little custom node to actually do a lot of this stuff. I want to see something. Yeah, so you can see that it's locked right now. So this is something that I should state to you. You can see this little unlock key versus locked. Unlock means you can actually edit what is happening here. You can edit all of this stuff. When it is locked, however, you're not going to see anything, which is fine. But if we view it and then look, we're going to see all of these nodes, but they're all grayed out. We can't we can move them, but we can't mess with them. So the way to fix that, and if you want to actually edit nodes that you get, or any node like exploded view is locked as well, because if you go in here, it's a whole system. What you can do is you can right click on it and then allow editing of contents. This will sort of allow you to jump into these nodes. Same if I did that on here. I don't know why I would need to work with exploded view, but this actually could help me out in figuring out how to edit each piece separately. Kind of on you, right? But that is the tutorial. This, again, one of the best features of Houdini is you can fracture anything now. I should have just kept the exploded view. I don't know why I keep doing that. Now we have a fractured thing. We have, we'll get Tommy Boy. Fuck it. We're gonna make the low res version though, because I don't want that to die at the moment. Fracture 100. Boom. Now he's fractured. This probably won't work great on every person, but it's fine. Maybe the padding needs to be adjusted. Let's mess with the padding. It also might just be broken. Yeah, it's bad with, I mean, fracture what you know you can fracture, right? Like this setup was gonna work for most things, but you know, be careful. Be careful, as they say, doing what you're doing. But that is this tutorial on HDAs and creating custom nodes. I hope you found it helpful. I am kind of like just doing stuff out of instinct of like knowing. If you have questions, please comment, talk to me, whatever, you know, do your thing. I'd love to hear. And you know, now that you actually have all this stuff, you know, we'll do this as a little like side thing. But now that you have all of this, you can set up very easily your sims by just plugging them all in. And now you got yourself a thing. Here, let me set that glue strength really low. Boom. Now you got yourself a really cool fracture system that you can easily honestly do whatever you want with, right? That is the benefit of Houdini. Let's you know, now let's do this cube. Yeah, I mean, this works on anything. It doesn't have to be just like a really simple primitive, but you know, do what you want on it. Things update and are very easy. So again, yeah, that's the end of this tutorial. I hope you, I do hope you find it helpful. This is like a really cool process for me. I love the fact that I can add images. I didn't even know I could do that. But yeah, cool. You know, the only thing I wish I could do, or I should have done, is change the shape of the node. Make it a dog bone fracture. I'm kidding, I don't like that. But yeah, peace.